Well, welcome to another episode of the Jimmy Rex Show. I am here with Allison Croghan, and it is a pleasure to be here. I met Allison a couple months back. We were actually all a big group of our friends were hanging out, and we went out to the bar downtown to Lake Effect, I think it was, and I learned a little bit more about, I'd seen her before on the news. This is a podcast that highlights exceptional people. I was excited to meet you because I've actually watched you on the news before, and I don't watch much of the news. The weather's about all I watch, which is kind of what you do.
Perfect, that's half my job.
And yeah, so I wanted to get you on here because it's one of those fascinating jobs. I think every kid watches the news when you're little, and at some point you want to be a news anchor or be the weatherman.
Did you want to be a news anchor?
I did. I actually, when I first went to college, my first 2 semesters, I took all the news media classes.
Which is why you have a podcast now.
And now I have a podcast. Yeah, I actually learned something. It turns out, I was starting it, but I learned in most cases, you have to be doing it for so long and in these weird situations making very little money before you actually get, any kind of promotion that's really cool. And so I decided to go the real estate route instead.
That's a good route.
I'm a little jealous, and I did hear you actually did a intern for ESPN. Is that right?
Yes. So my career was kind of wild. So I started out, I suppose you could say in high school, I started my journalism career originally in print journalism. And I was an editor of a magazine in St. Louis in high school. It was a magazine by high schoolers for high schoolers. And I was an editor there, then I was our yearbook editor. And when I got to school in Mississippi, at the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, I declared my major as print journalism. And then I quickly realized I wanted to do broadcasting, so I started out with that, and I started in sports. So then it's kind of wild how I've ended up now. I don't really do much sports. I'm more of a fan, which is nice. But sports is really tough because it's super competitive, and it's a lot of weekend nights. And I'm more of a Monday through Friday.
Yeah, I guess you don't even think about that. If you're the sports reporter, you're spending most of your nights and weekends always working.
Yeah, and it's hard to be a fan. So in college, I started doing a bunch of internships. I had like 10 internships in college, and they were all sports oriented. I worked for Ole Miss Sports. I worked for a radio station in St. Louis, KMOX 1120. I was their sports intern. And then I eventually worked for the Memphis Redbirds. I worked for the Ole Miss baseball team and Ole Miss Athletics. It was pretty crazy doing all the sports stuff, and then that's how I got my job at ESPN. So the summer between my junior year and senior year, it was kind of a wild time because I had actually studied abroad in January. So I was in London for that whole semester, and I was applying for summer internships, that crucial time right before senior year. And I did a phone interview, or a Skype interview, I guess it was, because I was living in London with ESPN. And so first it's like a series of questions. They make sure you have a sports background, and I totally did. I had brothers growing up. I grew up at the hockey rink and baseball fields. So I passed all of my questions for ESPN, and I ended up getting a job. So I came back from London. I went back to St. Louis for a week. And then I moved to Connecticut for a summer.
Well, and so I don't know if you remember this, probably 10 years ago, they did a contest, ESPN, all over the country, where it was called Dream Job. And it was become an intern at ESPN.
Oh, really?
It was literally called the Dream Job.
So that was probably 1 or 2 summers before I interned there.
Yeah, so you actually won the Dream Job. And what's funny is at the time is when I still wanted to be, that's what I was kind of thinking, maybe be a sports broadcaster or something like that. And so a buddy of mine had his pilot's license, and they were doing interviews for the Dream Job in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And he's like, dude, we can fly down in my plane. And I'm like, I don't know if I trust this buddy to fly us down, but we did. We jumped in his plane that morning, flew down, did the interview. I thought I did really good. I never got a call back, and I was like, that was kind of as far as I got with the ESPN Dream Job.
Do you remember what the role was in the internship program there?
It was, I don't remember now, but it was something to do with the sports broadcast division. It
was cool. I mean, they let me shadow whoever I wanted, and I had a really great time. So many great contacts. Everyone that I interned with. So they said more than 10,000 people that applied for 60 internships.
Wow.
And then they had us all living in student housing in downtown Hartford. And then we were commuting to Bristol. It was a 20-minute drive. Really cool just being at the headquarters there.
So who was your favorite person when you were at ESPN? Who was your favorite?
Michelle Beadle.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was doing Sports Nation then, and
with Colin Cowherd?
Yes. Or no, she wasn't doing Sports Nation. Was he still doing it at that time? Yes. And then we interned with her. I shadowed her. We are friends on Twitter together, and she gives me advice all the time with agencies, and she got me in contact with her agent a couple of years ago. So I didn't end up going with them, but really cool that she kind of took me under her wing, and she was probably my favorite person. She was the same that you see her on TV and the same that you see her in person.
So who was your least favorite person to have to do? Can you talk about that?
No, I didn't have
public names. Nobody that
no,
was.
No, I didn't have a bad experience. No.
Oh, that's good.
It was really cool.
Well, I had a chance. I made a list a couple of years ago. I think that in life we draw to us either by design the people that we want to have in our lives, or we just settle for whoever happens to fall into our lives. And so when it comes to, people do this really well with their relationship. You're a little bit probably more by design of what you're looking for, but I feel like a lot of times people don't do this with their friends. And so I make a list of like people I want to be friends with one day, and I've made this list a couple of years ago of 5 people I wanted to be friends with, and it's like shooting for the moon. Like Tony Robbins, who I've happened to get to know through, the Operation Underground Railroad stuff I do, and then Colin Cowherd was on the list.
Yeah.
And there was like this charity thing where you could have lunch with Colin Cowherd, so I bought it. I went and had lunch with him last March.
Did you tell him about your list?
I did. No, wait. I can't remember if I did or not. We ended up, it was cool. It was supposed to be a half-hour lunch, and we sat there for 2 hours.
Wow.
And I was smart, though, because one of the things I know about people is if it's your job, the last thing you want to do is sit there and talk about it forever. And so I actually didn't talk about sports. We didn't talk about, like he says most people probably ask him about, hey, what do you think about the Red Sox chances of it? And
right.
I didn't. We just talked life. And then he comes to Utah. We talked about that. And at the end, we ended up going for almost 2 hours. And anyway, I got his, gave me his phone number, his cell number, and we talked every now and then. But it was really cool because it was like, that was a guy that I just like. So if I had the chance to be an intern, that would have been the guy that I wanted to.
So who else is on your list?
The list is Vince Vaughn, who just got a DUI, so that might be more achievable now because he's probably going to be in some trouble for a while. I love Vince Vaughn. I think he's like the funniest human alive. But there's a couple other people on there, but we'll go back to interviewing you because I think people know me so much from the podcast, but we want to get to know you because you really do some awesome things. It's true. It's like the interviewer can't help herself. She's just like, I'm going to start interviewing.
I know. I feel like whenever I go on dates, I'm like, sorry, I just ask a lot of questions.
That's good. Well, there's 2 things. It's like you don't want the date to ever turn into an interview session. It's kind of like the podcast. If it feels too much like an interview, I always regret it later, right? If it's a conversation, it's much better. But like on dates, it is true. Like you have certain dates because you've been in Utah now for what, 6 years? And so you've gone on a lot of dates with different Utah guys. You've got a feel for this Utah dating market. We'll get into that, by the way. But I always try to make it more conversational, but you always know if either they're not asking questions back or they're not flowing into the conversation. It's like
picking up on those cues. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
I'm like, you know what, let's just go bowling or something. Like, I got dates for the quieter women that I go out with versus ones that are more outgoing, right? It's like if they're not much for talking, I figure this out pretty quick. We'll probably go watch a movie or something because we don't have to talk.
All right, so all the ladies who are listening that have gone out with you, they're like, oh wait, he's only taking me to see movies.
There's not that many of those.
I guess he doesn't want to talk.
So, because if I meet somebody they're not talking much, I probably know that we're probably not going to end up getting along that well. So, there you go. Well, so after ESPN, how did you end up in Utah? Because between there, you had a couple other jobs that you took, right?
Right. So another random thing, the first time that I ever reported on live TV was on ESPNU. I did some sideline reporting for an Ole Miss basketball game and totally was interested in going into sports. So my spring semester of my senior year, I started applying to jobs and I started seeing how little sports jobs there were out there. So I was like, well, I guess I'll just kind of cast a wide net, and I applied to pretty much every position possible. I mean, I sent out like stacks of my resume tape, like a DVD, which is like your highlight reel. This is before YouTube was like the way to do it. It wasn't that long ago, but yeah, it was a little bit ago. So I sent like what felt like a million resumes out, and I ended up getting a job offer back in my home state. So I got a job back in Joplin, Missouri. It was spring 2011, and crazy story here. Do you want to hear this?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay. So I applied for a job. I get it in Joplin. It was a really small market, a few hours from home, and I was actually shadowing Shepard Smith at Fox News in New York City. He had selected a couple of seniors. He went to Ole Miss. So he had selected a couple of seniors who were like outstanding journalism students to shadow him. He came down to Ole Miss for a week, and then I went to New York City for a week. And one of my first nights there, I actually saw that there was a tornado in Joplin. And I was like, well, this is kind of when Twitter was starting to be popular and kind of the breaking news platform. So I searched on Twitter and there wasn't a whole lot coming in, and then all of a sudden it was like one of the deadliest tornadoes our country's ever seen. So an EF5 tornado that killed 160 people.
Oh wow, and you happened to just be there for the...
Well, I was in New York City.
To.
Yeah, so I was in New York City and I knew that I was moving there the next week, and had I not gotten accepted into the Shep Smith class, I would have been in Joplin.
Actually,
and the place that I was supposed to live, destroyed.
Oh my word.
Like craziness. So I didn't even know, like, did I still have a job lined up? Was the station okay? Were my coworkers okay? Like, was I supposed to just hop on a flight from New York City and go straight there? Did they need help reporting? It was really nuts. So I got in touch with my news director, who was going to be my boss, and I said, do you need me to come down early? What's going on? She's like, no, finish your stuff up in New York and then come down, and then it's going to be all hands on deck when you get here. So the first person that I actually talked with that had been in Joplin was Diane Sawyer.
Oh.
We were having breakfast with her, like a little luncheon that Shep had set up with one of his friends, and she had just gotten back from Joplin the night before, and she was telling me it's crazy, the scene down there. When you get down there, you're going to require every single skill that you learned in school the last couple of years and some. So yeah, I got to Joplin and I got to fill in pretty much every position possible. I was supposed to be just a general assignment reporter, but half of my coworkers had lost everything. They needed time off. They were rebuilding their lives. The weather people needed time off, so that's how I got into weather, actually. They said, are you interested in filling in? And I said, well, I'm good at math and science, but I don't have a background in atmospheric science. Can you teach me? And they said, yeah. So they trained me on weather, and that's actually how I got into meteorology. I ended up going back to school for it, but that's how I started.
So literally because of the weather conditions and because of just the fact that that's where you were at, you had to learn meteorology right away.
Well, right, and it was such a unique time to learn it there because you had to word things so carefully, because there was obviously a lot of PTSD after this tornado because it was such a small town and tens of thousands of people were displaced, and everybody was impacted in a major way after the tornado. So people were especially, there was a lot of raw emotion there. People were missing for weeks and finding all kinds of crazy stuff, and I had to be really careful with how I worded things, and I learned a lot about how to present on television, especially when it came to weather, because if people woke up in the middle of the night and heard thunder, they were maybe waking up and thinking, is there going to be another tornado? Is this going to happen again? Am I going to lose my other child? You know, so I had to be really careful, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot in that year.
Yeah, I guess that's, you don't even think about that, but if the weather person reports something, exaggerates or reports it wrong in any way, it can actually have huge effects on thousands of people's lives that day.
Well, right, that's why you have to be very accurate, and then you also have to, you don't want to overhype things. You want to do it in a way that is accurate, and also there's a sense of urgency often where it's, you know, like today we had some severe thunderstorms here in Salt Lake. We don't get this very often, and we had the potential for some damaging wind and some damaging hail. But I learned a lot of these skills back in Joplin, where I was able to talk people through that today, saying, you know, I think we're going to be good. Just got to be really careful. It's a good day to be weather aware, and if these storms do develop, here's what you need to do, A, B, and C, to stay safe.
So do you write your own, like, that kind of stuff on a weather report? You doing that yourself?
I don't write it, it's ad-libbed.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So yeah, I do all the forecasting. I ended up, after I got the job in Joplin, they promoted me to our morning weather anchor, and then I decided to go back to school and study atmospheric science. So I do my own forecasting, and it's fun. I like weather a lot. It's different every day. It's a really unique place to forecast for here in Utah, because you have the entire state. You have the desert, you've got the mountains, you've got all different types of weather. We don't get severe weather very often here, but you get winter forecasting, you get the flash flooding and the slot canyons. So there's a lot of different things that go into it. And so it's different.
They want to know everything from like snowfall for skiing versus, and then you get all 4 seasons as well.
Plus you have to worry about the commutes and lake effect snow. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's different every day, and I really like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and so do you ever miss not doing sports where that was what you were originally going to go into? Would you go back to doing sports?
So I've done a little bit of sports here, but I like being a fan.
That's okay.
Yeah, I like being a fan. I grew up with brothers, like I said earlier, and just being able to go casually and enjoy a game, that's to me really cool. I mean, if I had a great opportunity, yes, of course, I would love to do some filling in, but for a day-to-day basis, you can't be Monday through Friday dayside.
So BYU and Utah fans think that BYU and Utah football is like this huge deal, and nationwide, I hate to say this, but we're just not on the radar. But how does it compare to Ole Miss or Mississippi, where football is life? Is it bigger here than maybe people think, or is it actually that much different than the South?
So I went to Ole Miss for my first degree, and then Mississippi State I did online. So I have 2 degrees from 2 different SEC schools, and the tailgating at Ole Miss is just crazy. Have you been?
I've been to Alabama tailgate.
Okay,
I've never been to
Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, it was the Alabama-Auburn game, so it was
it's a big.
I literally walked for
Is it
45. Yeah, I walked for 45 minutes straight through the tailgate.
Yeah.
I mean, it was miles.
It's
crazy.
a sea. It's crazy. I mean, Ole Miss is just known for being one of the best tailgates in the country. So I've found a couple of fun tailgates that I really like here at the U. My friend runs the Pig Bus. Like, they got live music. They've got really great food, and that's a lot of fun. But I mean, hardly anything compares to an Ole Miss football game. And we did play BYU when I was in college.
It's true. No, in fact, I was supposed to go to that game. BYU beat them. My buddy Kyle Van Noy, who was on the podcast a couple months ago, he actually had a strip sack fumble at the end of the game that he recovered for a touchdown that won us the game. So that was, we have those bragging rights. I think you were probably going to Ole Miss at the time.
Yeah, I remember seeing the signs in the tailgate people had. There was one that said, "Free beer for BYU fans."
Anybody take them up on it?
I'm sure a couple people did. And there was another, so the fraternities and sororities put signs outside of the houses, kind of just talking smack on whoever's in town playing. And one of them was like, "For a sober ride," or "Call a BYU fan," something like that.
Did you know anything about BYU at the time?
No, hardly. I had grown up in St. Louis, Missouri, and then I lived in Mississippi for 4 years, and then I studied abroad in London, lived in Connecticut for a summer, and I had been out west, but I'd never been to Utah. I didn't know much about it. And when I actually got my job offer in Joplin, I remember a lot of people being like, "Allison, like, Utah's crazy. Like, you can't move there." And I remember being like...
What was the worst thing you heard about Utah before you got out here?
I had a person, this is no joke, and it was so wrong. It's just so incorrect. He said, "This is going to be the biggest mistake of your life." He's like, "Utah is just weird." And I was like, "Well, I've accepted a job. It's beautiful. I flew out there. I'm really excited about it. I think that's really inappropriate for you to tell me that." But I mean, I've come out here. I've had job offers elsewhere since I've moved here, and I stay. This place is amazing.
You just re-upped your contract here.
I did. I just signed another contract with Box 13, and I love it here in Utah. And yeah,
So what's your favorite from an outsider? Because it is cool to get an outsider's view of Utah. I think Utah is an amazing place. I really think it's one of the most unique places in the world in all the right ways. And I've been all over the world. I've been to every state but like 2 now. And so what, from an outsider's point of view, what makes Utah special or unique? What do you love about Utah?
Just how accessible the outdoors are. I am in awe just driving around. And I don't know if I'll eventually grow out of that or what, but just driving every time I'm like, this is so incredible. Like yesterday I was out boating on the Jordanelle, and there was a little bit of some rain and a rainbow off in the distance. And I said to everybody on the boat, which like half the boat wasn't from Utah. A lot of my friends are from out of state here, and we all have just moved here and we love it. And we always talk about how lucky we are to live here. And I think that a lot of my friends who are from here maybe don't appreciate that as much, because I've lived somewhere where you can't see mountains in the distance, and it's just so close. And I know everyone brags about Colorado and, oh, like, let's move to Denver for a ski town, and it's no way.
Yeah,
this is so much better.
Well, it is funny because if you grow up here, you do take it for granted. I know when I was little, you just kind of, this is the world. That's all you know. And I remember a couple of years ago, I started looking at like the top 100 places you must visit in your life, or top 1,000 things to do before you die, and all these things are in Utah. And I'm like, wait, I've never gone to Bryce Canyon. I've never gone. I hadn't. No, I went 2 years ago. Finally, like I was dating this girl, and I said, hey, we need to go hit all these places up, and she was pretty adventurous, so we went to Bryce Canyon, and then I did last year I did Zion's finally and Arches and all that, and I'd never done them. That's my point, is like, if you're here, and by the way, if you're listening to this podcast right now and you haven't hit all the national parks, none of them disappoint. It's incredible, like every single one of them. And
people travel from around the world to go to them, so if you've got them a couple hours away.
Yeah, it's almost embarrassing how close we are to so many amazing places that a lot of people probably have never gone.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's been one nice thing actually about my contract being up every couple of years, is I know that there's a chance that I could be moving, and I come up with a bucket list and aggressively go after it, because I'm like, well, what if I'm moving in a few weeks? I might end up moving out of state, and I need to go do this, 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 and this. And then when my contract was up just about a month ago, I was going through my bucket list, and I was like, I'm not ready to leave. Like, this place has sucked me in. Like, I think I might be a lifer here. And, just having that though, and coming from out of state, I always have this like rolling list, but I try to get through it, because you never know.
What have been a few of your favorite things that you've done in Utah from the bucket list? Yeah.
Bear Lake was amazing. That's one of my favorites. It's so cool to see up there. I would say Arches, I absolutely love that area. Zion, I did Angel's Landing for the first time recently, so that was on my bucket list that I've been like attempting to do. And there's just so many great things. St. George, that was on my list. There's still a couple of places that I want to go to, but now that I think I'm here for a while, I'm not as aggressively going after them. Yeah.
So another thing about moving to Utah, coming from the South, and when you got here, you were single, 23 years old at the time. So talk to us a little bit, how was dating when you first got to Utah? Because I think people hear things as well, and I want the real, honest, raw truth. How has dating been in Utah? Give us a couple of things that you've had to adjust to or learn from, and then maybe some of the horror stories.
So when I first moved here, I was single for a couple of months, but then I got back together with an ex-boyfriend. So then we ended up dating for a couple of years. So I actually, the first 3 years that I was here, I was only single for a really small portion of time. So it was that first summer I moved here, I didn't really know anybody. I knew one person that I had gone to Ole Miss with, and I didn't know him that well. He had introduced me to some friends, and he was not Mormon, and he had grown up Catholic here, and I had grown up Catholic also, so we had that in common. And we had these mutual friends had told us, look him up when you get there. So I looked him up when I got here. He introduced me to some people, and then I don't remember, was Tinder out then, or what was out
Probably
then?
just coming out.
No, I don't think that was out at that point.
Like Match.com, is that what
No, I didn't do Match. No, I've never done Match. I've done Tinder, I've done Bumble, and I've done The League. And then I've also had some people who have made fake profiles of me, so.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, no, I don't know if that's that cool.
Well, they don't make fake profiles of low value people, so that's probably.
So the dating scene when I first got here, people had warned me, because I didn't know much about the LDS faith when I got here. And I was like, oh, it's okay, I'm just dating casually, and that's okay. My friends were like, they're gonna flirt to convert. And I was like, what do you mean? They were like, they're gonna try to get you to become Mormon. And so I had no idea. That was basically
Did you ever run into that?
I dated people who were Mormon and who had used to be Mormon, and I was just like, yeah, I'll go out with anybody who wants to go out with me. No, I'm just kidding. So I did go out with some guys.
Twitter's gonna get blown up now when we release the episode.
No,
she's no longer going out with just anybody. Okay, for the record.
I know that wasn't the case. I know, I'm just joking. So yeah, I had started the dating scene back then, but then I got back together with a guy that I had gone out with for a couple of years, and so then after we broke up, that's when Tinder and all those were out, so dating was a little bit easier to meet different types of people.
Yeah, well, that's my favorite thing about meeting people through those apps and stuff, though, is you do meet the most random people that you would never have met in life otherwise, and I just like meeting characters. I like meeting different types of people, so I actually, when I'm single, I like using the apps and stuff like that, because you just meet a variety of different, sometimes they're complete disasters, but sometimes those make the best stories anyway.
So I've got a lot of friends around the country, a lot of people around the country that just in general complain about dating. I was in New York City for a bachelorette party a few weeks ago, and they were like, dating in Manhattan's the worst. And I was like, what do you mean? There's all kinds of people here. Like, if you're complaining about dating in Manhattan, like, then how can anybody else complain anywhere? Everybody complains about it. So I know people complain about the dating scene here. It does make sense, though. I mean, if you're interested in dating somebody of the same faith, then automatically half of the population isn't in your
It is
dating
unique
bracket.
to Utah in the sense, like even on Tinder or something, right? You'll have every other girl's profile says either if you're LDS swipe left, or it'll be like on Bumble usually it'll be like if you're not looking for a LDS relationship, And so it's like if not swipe left.
Yeah.
So it's funny, like it's the only place I've ever seen that.
Well, right. I know when people come in and visit, it's always funny because you'll be chatting with somebody on one of the dating apps, and they'll be like, "What is this? Like, what's going on here?" Like when my girlfriends come out to visit, they'll be like, "Why does every profile say this?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, here's what's going on." And I'm like, "Let me see the mutual friends because I can tell you about that person." So this is a funny story. My girlfriend came out a few weeks ago, and she went on a date with this guy, and she was telling me about it the next day because I had to go to work the next morning. So she went out after I went to bed, and I was like, "So how'd your date go last night?" And she said, "Oh, it was great, and he lived abroad for a couple of years." And I was like, "Oh, where do you live?" And she was like, "Oh, he was in France for 2 years." And I was like, "That's called an LDS mission." She was like, "Oh, he left that part out."
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
That's really funny. Yeah, I went abroad for a couple of years.
I was like, that was absolutely
Not untrue, however.
100% an LDS mission.
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, he definitely did not include that information. So, the dating scene, it's certainly unique. I've had a great time with it. I've met a lot of really great guys, and
Did you ever have people that like hit you up, see you on the news, and then like want to like ask you out on dates and things like that?
Oh, like on Instagram and stuff?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do you handle those? Just ignore them?
Yeah, well, I just get a lot of messages on Facebook and Twitter and all of my followers combined. It's just too many to even read through. I mean, I'm not saying like too many of that. I'm just saying all the messages in general.
Well, yeah, when you're a public figure,
yeah.
people see your face every day, and so
Right.
I would imagine that there's a lot of, I have a friend that works for one of the other TV stations and has the same thing going on all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm just saying messages in general, and maybe I also get a lot of weather pictures and things like that. So just in general, a lot of messages to sort through. I don't get a chance to read every note that people leave me. So
Yeah, I assume so. Well, transitioning a little bit, something that, you not only do the meteorologist weather reporting, but you also do the social media reporting,
Mm-hmm.
and then you do the full anchoring now as well, like actual desk anchor?
Well, so yeah, I just a few weeks ago transitioned out of the main anchoring from 4:30 to 5:30 a.m. because when I renewed my contract, that was one thing that was important to me, was creating better hours. And
You didn't like the 4:30 a.m. window?
Well, you got to think about it. I mean, if you're on air at 4:30, you have to have your hair and makeup done, which I do myself. I know a lot of people think that I have a hair and makeup artist. I don't. And I also pick out my own clothes, so if you don't like them, people are like, "You need to fire your wardrobe person." And I'm like, "Well, I'm my wardrobe person, so great." And yeah, so I like to also read through the scripts that the producers had prepared for the anchoring. So I mean, I had to wake up at 2 a.m.
That's a terrible schedule.
And in the winter, I mean, you have to factor in snowstorms, so it's like sometimes you're waking up at 1:30 in the morning, and how are you actually going to have a life that's sustainable? I like to have a healthy work-life balance. I mean, I live here in Utah. I want to be able to go out and explore, and so I had this kind of weird shift that it was almost a split shift, but it wasn't, because I was also doing the weather on the midday show, so I couldn't shave off the beginning of my day, and then I couldn't shave off the end of my day because it was weather. And so I decided when I re-signed my contract to go back and not do the anchoring at 4:30 a.m. anymore. So now I get to wake up at 4:30, which is still early-ish, but it's much more reasonable than waking up at 2 a.m.
Yeah, no, that sounds a lot better.
I've got a lot of friends who wake up at like 4:45 to go to the gym. Like, it's not that.
Yeah, 4:30 is doable because
Yeah.
you just know you're going to bed a little bit earlier.
Right, you
I
just
mean,
go to
2 in the
bed.
morning though. I mean, you don't have time to.
I mean, I
if you
had to
want do
be,
anything the night
exactly, I
before.
had to be asleep by 6 if I wanted a full night of sleep. And I did, I just didn't have much of a social life.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So when you're doing the reporting, I mean, it's I always love watching the blooper films of the anchors and the people when they screw up. Have you ever had like a super bad blooper or screw up?
Last year was my first really big one that went viral, and it didn't go viral on its own. It went viral because it was part of the worst bloopers of 2017. And I was saying the name Leonardo DiCaprio, and I said Leonardo DiCaprio. I have never even actually called him that. Like, I know some people call him that, but I actually like him. So I said this, and then I guess it made it onto the blooper reel somehow. And yeah, I mean, I had people like writing me from around the world, being like, I saw your DiCaprio blooper, and I found you on Instagram. Hello from wherever. And I was like, oh my goodness. So people will still, like yesterday somebody just tagged me in it, like, hey, I was just watching this blooper thing and there you were. Or my sister sent me this blooper reel and then I saw you on it. And so that was like my big blooper. The other thing that you really have to worry about being on television every day, especially with our show, how long it is. I mean, we're on from 4:30 to 10 a.m. and then 11 to 1. Like, wow, that's a lot.
That's a long time.
Yeah, I mean, law of large numbers, you're going to have something's going to go wrong at some point with that much content. You wake up and it's the worst feeling, I swear. This is probably just sounds so odd to many people out there. You wake up, you turn your phone on, because I have to put my phone on airplane mode when I go to bed, and then you just wake up to like 50 text messages and tweets being like, you're the top story on The Daily Show, or you're on Jimmy Fallon, and it's like, or Jimmy Kimmel, whatever show it is, and you're like, why? Like, what did I do that deserved that? And for me, luckily, when that happened to me last time, like, it wasn't anything that I messed up on. It was just, I had been reporting on the Kardashians, and they just aired my report and then made fun of the Kardashians. And yeah, you never know, like, it's just a weird thing to log it, turn your phone on, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, the possibilities here are endless.
Yeah.
Did I say something really weird yesterday?
That's funny. Well, when I recently almost sunk my houseboat in Lake Powell,
yes,
which, by the way, you were supposed to be on the trip with us. You would have been able to do like a live report.
Except for there's no service in Lake Powell.
That's true. That's true. We could have had like a live reporter just giving us the.
Do you know how many people talk about that? And I'm like, I was supposed to be on that boat.
You blew it. You had your big Jimmy Hoffa moment, But no, it was funny because the next morning I put the video, and I knew it was gonna do well. Like when I put
as soon as you put the Titanic track behind it.
It was funny because my buddy, he's like, I have a guy that runs my marketing stuff full time between my real estate company, my podcast, and this real estate course I sell online, and he kind of helps me with my Instagram too. And I sent him all the clips. I said, put together a funny collage video. Yeah. And he sent it back, and I'm like, oh, it's missing something. And I was like, oh, I got it, Titanic. And so I put the Titanic music, I go vaguely put the Titanic music on it, and he sent it back. And as soon as I watched it, I was laughing. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is going to do good. And so I put it up, and I mean, the next morning, that day it got to like, I think, 4,000 or 6,000. It's like almost
a million now.
So it's at 1.3 million as of this time, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And I started getting messages from Switzerland, the next morning from Switzerland, Australia, Sweden, you name it, all over the world. And that's when I was like laughing. I was like, oh, we went viral. That's pretty
Going viral is just the strangest thing.
Isn't it? Oh yeah. And it is, I started reading the comments. It was funny because this is kind of how it works in general nowadays. It's like,
don't read the comments.
Well, on Facebook, all the comments were super positive because it's people's profile. You get to see who they are, and other people can see who they are. So everybody, like 95% was like, oh, dude, that guy kept his calm really cool.
Well, right, and they have their real name attached to their Facebook profile.
And then I went on the Daily
Mail.
The Daily Mail, and I read those comments, and I was like 15 comments in, I'm like, I think I'm done, because it's all anonymous, and people are just brutal. I was like, all right, I guess I'm like, man, I thought I had thick skin, but I don't like that. And so I can only imagine but you really think about it, like online these days, so many people are anonymous. I don't give any credence to any kind of anonymous account. If somebody's like putting their name out and they're like, saying something negative, it's like, okay, I can handle that.
Right.
Like, I like to know what I need to do better. But when people are just being vicious or mean, it's like, you have to just completely ignore it. I feel bad for public figures these days because so much of it can be out there.
Well, not even just public figures. I feel bad for like teenagers on Instagram.
Sure.
Like the pressures. Like there was Facebook kind of when I was in high school and MySpace and things like that. But just with what people write online, like you said, you think you have thick skin and
you start reading something and you're like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you guys, I mean, the news industry in general is a little bit under attack right now. You've got the whole fake news thing and everything like that. What is your opinion of the industry as a whole versus, because I think I read a report that 94% of the American public doesn't completely trust the news anymore.
Well, I think there's a major difference between the network level and the local level. I mean, the local level, the journalists that you meet are some of the hardest working people that there are, and are honest people, and who honestly just want to do a great job covering their community and tell stories that matter.
I would agree.
There's a huge difference, and I think when people refer to the fake news media, the people who attack the local media, they just don't know like that it's different.
Yeah, I can't think of a single story from a local media that I'm like, oh, that seems like fake news. It's always one of the national pundits that's pushing an agenda for money, kind of.
Right, and a lot of the people that are those people, that's what they do for a living, is they share their opinion. But at a local level, I think that journalism, I mean, it's here, it's important, it's such an important thing for our community. And I think that it doesn't get the respect that it deserves.
No, I would agree with that. I think you see the Salt Lake Tribune just laid off a bunch of people. Do you feel like with how much accessibility people have to information now, I mean, it's one of those things that we really take for granted, the amount of information. Before, if you wanted to know about a subject, I mean, you literally had to buy a book and you had to go to the library and hope they had it, and then you might read the whole book.
Yeah, I still go to the library.
There you go.
I do.
But now you probably can quickly find out where the information is.
I go to the library for my fun books, and also the library has an app where you can rent regular books, so you can just rent them and download right on your iPad.
There you go.
But yeah, no, I know what you're saying. Like you had to go and like do all of that research, and with the internet being so accessible, is that what you're kind of asking?
I mean, do you think the news, it's going to change over the next 10, 15 years with the amount of information, and how does that affect like at the local level?
Well, I think that what's really important is that when people are doing this research that you're talking about, where they will independently do their own research, you have to be so careful about what sources you're trusting online, because people will send in stories and be like, oh my goodness, look at this. And I'm like, look at where that's coming from. That is not an independent source. Like that should not be trusted. And I think that there's this big divide, and you got to really take into account where this information is coming from online. And just because you see it on a website doesn't, if it's clickbait, it's probably or maybe not true.
Right.
Or it's doing that so that you will get mad and you will share it so they can get links back to their website. So I think that, of course, the local television landscape will change over the next couple of years. How it's going to, I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, but with the way that, I think there's a huge push for social, and obviously online. I think podcasting is going to be really big over the next couple of years. I listen to a ton of podcasts on my own, and I like getting my news that way. And a lot of people that I meet say, I don't own a TV, but I live stream you on my iPad, or I do this, or I do that, or I watch you. I met somebody at a Jazz playoff game who came up to me and he was like, I live in California now, but I still live stream Fox 13 in the morning on my iPad to get my news.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the cool parts about your job is you do get to get all the information every day. I guess that can probably be a positive and a negative, but it's a really cool thing. I know when you do your social media reporting, you're digging through a ton of stories to find that. So part of your job is to really know what's out there.
Right, so for the first couple of hours of my day, what we were saying earlier is I spend the last 2 hours of my day doing my weather reporting from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. But in the morning, for the morning show, I do the social media trending segments, and I produce those myself. I get all of the information, and I write the scripts, and I kind of figure out what's going on, and I try to present the information as it is, and I really value my role as a journalist, and I know that so many people do. Journalists are some of the best, hardest working and honest people out there, and I think that with the way that trending is maybe you have to present the information and people can maybe decide on their own, but you also have to be aware of when people are sharing the information online, who's the person that's sharing that? Is that your friend from high school who's completely one way or the other? You have to...
Something cool about, you got in so young into the industry that people already recognize your face, and I think there is a level of trust that comes from, oh, I've been listening to her for 5 years, right? I've been getting my information from her, and she's always been very honest in her reporting, and it seems like she knows what she's doing. And
Thank
so
you.
people, as they get that, as you get in more and more into your, as this career progresses, I think you'll have that trust level always, like you said, especially at the local level, because it is so much different news than it is just kind of news shows. I guess.
So many people, like at my station, I work for Fox 13, and we've got Bob and Hope who've been anchoring together for more than 20 years at night, and Dan and Carrie in the morning who've been anchoring together for like 10, 15 years. And the longevity, just the consistency, a lot of people will come up to me and be like, I've watched Bob and Hope every single night for the last 20 years, and you guys are a part of my family, and we bring you into our living room every night when we turn our TV on, and we trust you. And I think that, the longer that you're on a station and you develop those relationships, and then especially with social, people connecting with me on there, and I can write back, and all the comments, whether they're nice or they're not so nice, we see them. But just in general, I think that developing those relationships and people trusting me as a journalist, and same with my coworkers who are all great journalists, it's really, really an important thing in this day and age.
Well, and so you started, because you started young, you said when you were in high school, you wanted to be part of the journalism program and all that. Did you, when you were a kid, watch the news and want to do this? Or how did this when did it become where you knew this is what you were going to go into?
So there was a really cool, and there still is, it's still there in St. Louis, like a children's museum kind of thing. It's called the Magic House. It's in Kirkwood, Missouri. If you guys are ever on vacation there, totally worth going to. They had a little set where you could be a news anchor. And I've got a picture of me reading the news there. And then another thing my parents did is they bought at an auction one time a day of shadowing a local reporter in St. Louis. It was like a beer reporter for the day, and so I got to go shadow this reporter in St. Louis with my family, and that was really cool. And I think it's important for parents to cultivate experiences for their kids. You don't have to go buy that at an auction. I don't even know if people do that anymore, but
you could probably just make a phone call though, and I'm sure you'd let, if some little girl wanted to come and shadow you for a day up to a certain availability that you could.
There's so many experiences where parents will write in, and I'm huge now with STEM, especially for young girls, just trying to encourage girls to get into those fields. And so I joined forces with a bunch of local meteorologists, female meteorologists, on Pi Day earlier this year. That was the day that we spoke out and we were encouraging girls to get into STEM careers. And I had a lot of parents who wrote in and said, my daughter wants to be a meteorologist and things like that, and what can I do? And so I gave them the resources right there. So write me on Facebook and tell me what's going on, and I would love to help do that, because I know how important it is from a young age to be able to help kids realize what their potential could be if they really just buckled down, as my dad would like to say.
Yeah, well, what a great job by your parents, though, to give you that opportunity just as a young kid, and something that you probably never forgot.
Right, definitely. I had a great upbringing. My mom really, she was a great stay-at-home mom. We had this thing called Adventure Day once a week, where we would wake up on Friday morning and she would say, "Today's Adventure Day, what do you want to do?" And I would get to plan the whole day, or my brothers would be there to whatever it was. And that helped hone a ton of important skills, like planning and picking different things that are important to us, as far as if there was a new exhibit at the zoo or whatever it was, and kind of creating a menu for lunch for a picnic. I had to pick those foods out, how to be healthy and things like that. So just being kind of well-rounded and helping kids develop those skills, it's important.
That's one of the coolest things you've said, I think, the whole podcast. I love that. The idea of just mom let you pick once a week, just whatever you want to do, but you've got to plan it. Is that kind of how it works?
So she would she was sneaky. She would suggest things throughout the week.
She probably should have been.
Yeah, no, she would say, maybe the day before, she would drop some suggestions like, "Hey, the baby penguins were just born at the zoo today. Next time we go to the zoo, we should look for the baby penguins." And so then tomorrow rolls around, the next day rolls around, and she'd be like, "It's Adventure Day, what do you want to do?" And I'd be like, "I heard there's some penguins at the zoo." And, but helping kids and develop those skills, that's really important.
Yeah. No, and I think it's important too that more and more women like yourself get into the public figure of the public eye of these important job roles, like being a reporter, being in the news and things like that. It touches a lot of people, and I know a lot of people. It's more people than you probably realize look up to you because you are one of the public figures of Utah for young women.
Thank you. I try to take that pretty seriously. I try to be a good role model and well-rounded. I think that's really important. Just being involved in the community, giving back when I can, and being a good journalist just in general, excelling in my profession. And then also I try to have a good element of fun and adventure, so socially, visiting with friends a lot, and then also just getting out and enjoying nature. I try to make sure that I have all of those things checked.
Well, being a journalist, you get access to a lot of pretty cool things that maybe normal people wouldn't, right? Just because you get to report on certain random things.
So many things. My friends joke around that I'm kind of the social planner because we'll do segments or whatever, and I'll say, okay, well, I know that, like, I've got a whole thing on my phone of all the cool things happening in Salt Lake this summer. And so I've got like a schedule, like pretty much every day of the week, like what event is really cool that's happening here? What can I do today? And so I'll invite my friends, hey, what do we want to do over the next couple of weeks? Because we've got this concert that night we can go to, or we can go to this concert instead. And so just being involved in the community. I mean, there's so many cool things to do here in Utah. We're so lucky.
No, I totally agree. Well, last question I'll ask you. I mean, being in journalism, your career is not really in the beginning stages anymore, but you're still there's going to be some changes throughout the next couple decades. What's your perfect job in journalism if you could have your dream job in journalism?
Well, let's see. That's a really tough question. I really like what I'm doing a lot now. I like that my bosses have been so accommodating with my last contract negotiation, which was creating better hours for me so that I can still be off work at 1 p.m. and go hiking or go skiing, and that work-life balance, that's what's really important to me. And I want to be really involved in, I want to have a family for sure. I know I want to be a mom, and I would love to have the flexibility of being able to order those things in the way that I would like to order them. So I think that any job that would allow me the flexibility of being a mom someday, that would be like the coolest position that there could be.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. For those that want to watch you more, your Fox 13, when is the best time to catch you on the air?
Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. till about 9:30 is when I'm on, but our show is on 4:30 to 10. And then I do weather from 11 to 1, Monday through Friday.
Do you ever get people mad at you for getting the weather wrong or anything?
Well, I never get the weather wrong.
Well, I guess they're a lot more accurate now than they used to be. I mean, the joke when you're little is the weatherman's, whatever he says, do the opposite. Right?
That's our favorite joke. No, it's hard. Forecasting for this many people, like it could be a block down. Like it was dry here at my house, but there was
I saw my people with hail coming down this morning, and I was like, "Where are you at?" Because it was in Sandy. I was like 20 minutes from it, but there was clear skies where I was.
It's difficult, and that's one of the things I actually enjoy about our forecasting here is that you want to be as concise as you can, but you have to forecast for the whole state in like 2.5 minutes. So what are the major impacts going to be? What's the weather story? And hopefully relaying that properly so that people don't make that joke anymore. I
love it. Well, if all else fails, throw a jacket and a swimming suit in your car and call it good, right?
Yeah, and always, when thunder roars, go indoors, right?
Not necessarily. I was at the Alpine Slides yesterday, and it thundered, and they shut it down for like 45 minutes. Yeah. I was like totally like, can I just sign a waiver and just do this?
I'm glad they did that.
They did not let me. I was so and there's no refunds on your ticket. And I just didn't want to wait for 45 minutes, so I just left.
Well, I bet you if you would have gotten struck by lightning, you would have changed your
but
mind.
What a story, going down the Alpine Slide.
Get out of town. Get out of here.
Anyway, well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.